Thanks for clicking on the video. This is going to be a bathroom vanity build for a small master bathroom. You can see in the opening shot the Shaper 3D file on my iPad. The design here is for a smaller bathroom, but it's also the master bath, so we're going to try to get as much storage as we can. Next to the actual vanity is going to be a floor to ceiling storage cabinet attached to the actual vanity. Here we're just milling up some red oak that's riffs on, so you can see the straight grain. Trying to keep it as modern as possible with his little flat sawn showing. Started off by cutting all the pieces to rough length, getting them all milled up and letting them sit and acclimate in my shop for a few days. Once they were all acclimated, I started cutting each piece out to make up the vanity frame. This is my miter saw fence with the woodpecker stops and the Festool Capex to make these cuts to length. Although the Capex does a pretty good job, I always like to take it over to my crosscut sled and cut all the pieces to final length. Once I have all the pieces for the face frame cut to final length, I'm going to start marking my lines for the domino layout. And here you can see me raising one of the pieces off the face of the work table so that it's inset a bit from the face to give it some more depth. Here I'm using my Domino 500 to do the joinery on this. I wanted to make it as quick and easy as possible to get this face frame put together, and I did not want to use pocket holes just to keep this a little bit stronger and more durable. You can see what a great tool this is. Everything goes together super easy. Just doing a dry fit here. Here I'm cutting down some more red oak to size. This is going to make up the legs for the vanity carcass. Again, I'm using the domino for the joinery, and on the pieces I'm adjusting the offset just a few millimeters to get the panel set back just a hair from the face. And I'm using red oak plywood. It's also riffs on to match the solid wood. Just doing some more test fitting with the dominoes, making sure everything fits, that I did the offsets correctly. You can see there it's set back about 2 millimeters. Just to give it a little bit more depth and character there. And these panels, at least on the right side, will be pushed up against the wall, so they'll really never be seen. Some more domino cutting and some more dry fitting on the other leg. And you can see in the background the floor to ceiling shelf that's going to make up the left side of this vanity. We'll get to that build in a little bit in this video, but essentially it's the same construction as this vanity frame using solid red oak riffs on with dominoes and red oak veneered plywood. Now I'm starting the construction on the inside of the cabinet. Chose to use cleats to hold the inside shelf of the cabinet to the frame. And here I'm using dominoes, and I also use the Lamello Zeta P2 just so that I can click those in and not have to do any weird clamp ups. You can see a good close up here of the Lamello clicking into place with those cleats. And here we have some pre-finished plywood that's going to make up that bottom shelf. It's already pre-finished, so it can hold up to anything that's spilled inside that vanity. You can see it just sat right there on the cleats. Here's some more examples of the Lamello joinery with some dominoes for alignment. And this piece here is going to make up the back rail of the inside of the vanity. So I'll be able to use that Climax to take on and off that piece of plywood, which is going to act as a, I guess, backer piece so that items inside the vanity don't fall out the back, which you'll see later in the install. Back to the table saw. I cut some slats for the lower shelf that's going to be open. Here you can see the layout of each of the slats, trying to get equal spacing between each of them. So I cut little pieces of scrap once I figured out the math and started laying out domino lines. For this, I wanted to have the bottom shelf just as one piece for the install. I didn't want to have to do a glue up, worrying about all 18 or however many slats I had here. So I just wanted to glue all these up at once, have that shelf ready to go, and then be able to attach that to the legs on either side of the vanity. You can see how this all comes together. Now that that bottom shelf is all one piece, it joins to each leg of the vanity and then to that face frame. And that pre-finished shelf slides into place. And you saw me measuring there to make sure everything was square and equal distances inside the cabinet, since these are going to be inset doors. I'm taking more red oak and milling it up through my planer. And this is the Oliver 20-inch planer. I also have an Oliver 8-inch jointer. Both so far have been great tools. And here I'm running some red oak plywood through my table saw, cutting out a rabbet on each side. And this is going to fit inside the rails and stiles of the doors that I was milling up just before this. And this is the dado cutting into the rails and stiles for each of the doors that that plywood's going to slip into. And now it's test fitting those rails and stiles just to make sure the dado's cut to the correct size. You can see kind of how this is going to go together. And the panels in these are set back again about 2 millimeters, same as the side legs of the vanity. Once I have those test fit, make sure the dados are correct, I'm going to start working on the tongue and groove. It's going to join these rails and stiles together. You can see using the crosscut sled over a dado stack. And here it's going to show how it slips into place there. And once those are cut to size and all the tongues and grooves are cut, I'm going to do a quick dry fit before I glue these up. With this design, I specifically did the setback real shallow. I wanted some separation between the rails and stiles in that panel in between, but not a ton like on a traditional craftsman style door. As I mentioned, these are going to be inset doors. So I left them a little oversized during construction, and now I'm going to start measuring out exactly how big of a gap I need in between the face frame and the doors. So I put that 3/32 spacer at the top there, marked out a line on the bottom, and then just took a hair off to get that gap at the bottom also. Did the same thing on the other door. What you can't see there is I kind of split the difference so that the top and the bottom rail are still the same width. One's not wider than the other. Here I'm putting in some blocking for the hinges of the doors and using the Craig jig to cut out the hinge holes for each of the doors. Here I'm using the woodpecker saddle square to lay out the lines for these hinges. It's the first time I use these hinges. It's the Solis, I think they're called. Seem to go in okay, but I did not realize that I did not get the soft closing hinges. So you can see them kind of bounce there, which is not good. Now we're on to the construction of the floor to ceiling cabinet. It's going to go on the left side of the vanity. This was right after I got my Lamello Zeta P2, so I really wanted to use it as much as I could. So I could have used pocket holes here or the domino to join this cabinet together, but I chose to test out the Lamello, which worked great and made it fast because I got to skip over a lot of the clamping. Each of the shelves is laid out with dominoes as well. And the shelves are going to be fixed at that height, so this will be glued up as one solid piece here. You can see me putting more of the Tenso Lamello connectors at this bottom shelf. This will be the base, and then you can see it clicking in together right there. Getting this thing stood up for the first time, it's pretty solid, but I'm still gonna add a back piece of plywood to kind of reinforce the back and keep this thing as rigid as possible, since it is pretty tall. Now I'm working on the face frame. Again, this is going to be riffs on red oak. Laid out some domino lines for the vertical pieces, and then cut each of these horizontal pieces to length using my miter saw. And again, this whole thing was joined together using dominoes. And glued in place and clamped together. You can see how tight fitting it was just with the dominoes. So this might be kind of overkill with the clamps, but just wanted to make sure there weren't any gaps in between the face frame and the cabinet carcass. Once it was all glued up and dried, I took a flush trim router bit along the outside edge and flush trimmed this face frame to the side. I didn't want any kind of overhang here because the cabinet's going to butt directly up against the vanity. Here you can see a sacrificial piece that I put on the back side of the vanity just to run my router against. with a little trim bit to create a rabbet so I can drop in that 1/4 inch plywood for the back of the cabinet. Now it's time just to dry assemble the vanity with the cabinet. You can see on the lower back of the inside of the cabinet, that piece that sticks up. That's the piece that we made with the Clamex earlier. A little shelf to prevent things from falling outside of the back of the vanity. Because of the plumbing at the client's location, this shelf had to be a little bit shallower inside the vanity to allow for the plumbing to come up behind it. There's the cabinet going in place next to the vanity with the door on the lower part there. And then when this thing was delivered to the client's house, I ended up using lamellos again to connect that vanity to the cabinet unit, so there's all one piece, and then connected it to the wall. I also delivered it without hardware to the client. They added that later. And again, that lower back piece is removable with the Clamex lamello pieces, just so that I could get it in and around all the plumbing during the install. And then the piece goes in once it's up against the wall. Thanks for sticking with me to the end. Hope you enjoyed the video.